country's capital, Freetown.
A look at Charles Taylor's life preceding his trial in The Hague. He studied in the United States during his youth, and then he returned to Liberia to join the newly formed government of coup leader Samuel Doe. But 3 years later, the two fell out after Doe accused Taylor of embezzling $1 million. Taylor fled back to the United States. He was arrested, but somehow managed to escape from his cell. He resurfaced in 1989, set up his National Patriotic Front of Liberia and launched a rebellion against Doe. 2 years later, neighboring Sierra Leone descended into civil war. Taylor is accused of helping to orchestrate it by supporting Sierra Leone's rebels. Liberia's own civil war ended in 1996. The following year, Taylor became Liberia's president. He was forced out of office in 2003 and went into exile in Nigeria. He was arrested in 2006 and sent to The Hague for trial. A brief sketch there. We're joined in the studio by Piper Hendricks, who works as an international lawyer with Human Rights USA. She attended the criminal trial of Charles Taylor Jr. and has also been involved in the civil case against him, also known as Chuckie. He was convicted of torture by a US court back in October. To return to Charles Taylor Jr.'s father's case, how strong do you think the case is against him?
I think thus far it's very strong. I think you have to keep in mind that before the prosecutor is even going to bring an indictment, there has to be a certain level of evidence. So the fact that an indictment was brought in this case is a positive sign already. There's also the fact that there were 91 witnesses that were brought against him, and as was mentioned earlier, some people have criticized the fact that there haven't been as many linkage witnesses as some people would have liked. And there's two routes that the prosecution can choose. Either you focus on the linkages or you focus on the atrocities. And in this case, there's so many vivid atrocities that that's the route that they chose to go.
Right, we heard Taylor's lawyer there saying, well, that's all very well. We know atrocities happen in Sierra Leone, but what about the command and control responsibility?
Right. And you have some difficulties in that there were former warlords who might have been great witnesses that are no longer living. So there's some question as to whether some of the testimony will be more on a hearsay side, but I think when you have a number of the witnesses who were direct victims, you still have enough testimony. There was a motion for acquittal after the closure of the prosecution's case, and that was denied. I think that's another factor to take into account. The court has already looked at the defense's argument that there wasn't enough.
But I mean, can we see a direct linkage there as one looks at these linkage witnesses even? I mean, can you see the fingerprints of Charles Taylor on the atrocities that occurred in Sierra Leone?
Absolutely.
Directly?
Yes. And if you look and see, the way that he was funding the rebel forces and the return that he received in the diamond trade and different advantages to him, I think there is a strong enough case.
Obviously, everyone wants to see people who have done bad things brought to justice, but as always with these international trials, that question of double standards will arise. And I mean, there's also that danger that these very complex wars, especially in Africa, about minerals and diamonds and timber and so on, supported by various international actors often, are turned into conflicts of bad men who have done bad things. Is there that danger once again here?
I think that there is. I mean, that there's, as you're saying, there's a risk involved that this will become more political rather than something where you're just trying to hold, and I shouldn't say just, but war criminals accountable. There's been a history of impunity throughout the world, especially in a lot of African nations. And so taking this trial, I think it's a positive example of no longer... Right,
but those who actually bought the timber and the minerals and diamonds, who hitched their wagon on Charles Taylor in order to give them the international contracts, aren't being held to account. And then, of course, there's that other issue of double standards. We were talking about Charles Taylor's son. He was tried on a law which the US refuses to use for its own government officials on torture and so on. I mean, again, that double standard is particularly glaring.
Right, and that's unfortunate. I don't know that I'd want to comment right now on the United States' refusal to allow its own people to be held accountable. I do think it's a positive step, and many people in the human rights community believe it's a positive step to have the Charles Taylor Jr., we often call him Chuckie, held accountable. And that was the first case of its kind under the U.S. version of the Convention Against Torture law, the statute enacting.
So we'll see whether a precedent is actually set.
We will see.
Thank you very much. US financial giant Goldman Sachs has announced record quarterly profits of $2.7 billion. The announcement surpassed the expectations of many analysts, spurring a stock market rally. But Goldman's stock performance has raised questions over how it was able to return to such impressive results just months after it received billions of dollars in government bailouts. Al Jazeera